Right, we're back with some Explorer gameplay. You might notice this first game is unranked because I, like a fool, went in the wrong queue. But I decided to leave the game in anyway. So I play a bit fast and loose here, keep a dodgier hand because, well, this isn't a ranked game. Very surprised to find mono red. I guess maybe it's a guy clearing his dailies, but usually you get more experimental decks in the queue here. Although I will say, the fact that he stole my Niv Mizzet has put me on edge here. So ultimately, as you can see here, we are just hitting all of the lands. I keep the Wandering Mind going here. Faces of Kamuno comes down. Fanatical takes us down, we go down. I'm putting it all on this draw. I'm after Fable, Edgar, anything that could swing the tide in our favour. Find a Leyline Binding, which is interesting. So I decided to play a land and see what happens here. I'm hoping I can catch out a Embercleave effect. They go into combat. We go for the Leyline Binding. Get rid of the Annex, and we Tyrant Scorn the Monastery, so we're just taking one here, which is more manageable. They have another Annex, we just find another land. I decide to thin out our deck. Go for the cycle. Cycle again, because I'm getting frustrated here. We find a Leyline Binding, faces flips, but at this point, we're going to be on free life burning out here. Alright, so Fatal pushes in. We made a few modifications to the sideboard, as you'll see in the list. More wipes in, Kaito out, and ultimately I take out Path to the World Tree because on 2 I'd rather be removing creatures than, well, taking a turn to Manifix. I keep the Strength of the Clarion here. So on their turn they play Faces of Kameno. Knowing now that, we play this and go for a turn 2 Growth Spiral. Opponent takes a long time considering here, goes for a Robber. I use Growth Spiral, and then decide that I can actually cast a 1 mana Leyline Binding here to not take free and to prevent them from stealing our stuff. Play a tapped Shockland, bring Yorion into hand, make him think the only thing we're going to do is go for Yorion. Try to bait him to drop a few more creatures here. They take a long consideration, which makes me wonder what they've got in hand. They drop another Robber of the Rich, gets our Kolaghan's Command. Choose to keep the board clear with Clarion, we want to stay as high up as possible. We have an instant speed Growth Spiral. They have their third Robber of the Rich here, but here's the deal. With this we can draw a card, put a land into play, and we have the same amount of cards so they don't steal anything else from us. They drop a Rolling Vortex. We go for the Niv Reload. We hit not too good, but Vanishing Verse is free removal against a monocolored deck. Our opponent drops a Burning Tree. Another Chandra just to kill. Does a damage to us and then tries to swing in, which is weird because I think they just want to steal something. Fortunately for us, they try here, they get the Fatal Push, but that's useless against us. So here, go to combat. We can swing in with Niv. I was meant to say you'll go there, I was not BMing, I swear. This opponent was taking a long time. These videos are sped up to twice speed, so every pause or timeout is double the length here. We blink Niv to get another Niv activation. Find Edgar and Assassin's Trophy, solid removal here. We let them get pinged one more time with a Rolling Vortex, and once they've committed this to the board, we know that there's nothing else in hand for them, so we'll go with the Vanishing Verse to take out the Rolling Vortex, and they can see to this because they know they're not going to sneak any more damage through with our big creatures blocking us. No other changes, run it back for game 3. Opponent is taking a little bit longer than I was expecting. I keep an okay-ish hand here. Basically, I'm hoping to snipe early interaction, then swing out to a Niv here. They get a Monastery Swiftspear, we draw a second Niv. They play a Rolling Vortex, clearly trying to gain value over time. I pass back here, let them get hit with the Rolling Vortex and see what they want to do. They play a Fanatical Firebrand. So now I've got a choice when I want to use this Vanishing Verse on. I ultimately choose a Swiftspear here. We're still taking a ping here, but we get rewarded with another Vanishing Verse. So once again, we'll let them get pinged with their Vortex, make sure they don't play anything too scary here. We just take one here. In the end step, we'll get rid of that Rolling Vortex. We find the Fable of the Mirror Breaker, which is great for us. So we play Fable, drop another land, so we're guaranteed here with our lands and Nivs and Niv activation. And we're still on 13 life with 4 cards in hand. And our opponent starts to burn out. They play with fire here to try and get a scry. Land into Monastery Swiftspear. They have 1 card in hand here and they go for an attack with the Swiftspear. I go for the trade here because if they either have to use a burn spell to save it and then we know there's nothing in hand, or they do this, which is the better option, and they sacrifice the whole board to kill our Goblin token, not aware that our Niv is coming next. Or potentially an Edgar. Fable Cycle will get rid of the Fable from the Fable. Nice little synergy there. Drop a Niv. Get a few cards.
Reload!
We'll discard a second Niv to send a little message here. Our opponent concedes after that. They've not got the resources to burn us out. Right, so with our non-ranked game out of the way, let's move into the actual ranked matches. We got a match here against Badger. Keep a solid hand of interaction and things. Our opponent drops a Temple of Deceit. And I'm intrigued because I think this could be Reanimator, Control, maybe something interesting. A shock in a land. Opponent drops the thing, goes for Thoughtseize. What they take here could be quite telling. They dropped a Guildgate, so I think originally I believe they were on gates, but we get rewarded by finding another Vanishing Verse. They cycle Go for the Throat, which is weird for me. So I'm not sure what this deck is, so I just put Yorion into hand and pass, and they concede because there's nothing going into hand. So I'm thinking this is either some kind of crazy budget brewer combo, so I think about bringing in Thoughtseize, and then I take out the Thoughtseize again if I remember correctly, because I'm just like, I'm up a game, I don't know what I'm up against, let's just run it back, because I'm pretty sure this must be some kind of crazy combo brew. And the shuffler hates me, so it gives us this abomination of a hand. I keep this version of the hand, and then ultimately try and decide what I want to get rid of. I get rid of Kaito, expecting there to be a Thoughtseize here. Opponent really takes their time here. There we go. They use a Temple land here. Pass the turn. Another Skyline into a Thoughtseize here. The right move is probably the Fable. I'm still going to fetch for red here, just to set up for Wandering Mind next turn. We draw a Triumph, so I decided to deploy that anyway. I want a bit more time to see what they're on. They drop their Fable. So I pass back, I Vanishing Verse to get rid of the Fable to stop them using any draw, which turns out to be a bit of a mistake here, because if I left it going I would have seen the Sheldred, and this is where it basically turns out they're literally just Rakdos, but they don't have all the rares, so they're not using the full rares and they're just splashing blue for a few cards. So with that in mind and knowing that I kept a bad hand here, we get Thoughtseize, so we get Fatal Push, sorry, so I concede to save time. I know it's Rakdos now, so we bring in the Thoughtseizes. We'll go down to Kaito, and we'll go down one of the Path to the World trees. So, game 3 here. As I've said, they are very clearly a... this is a Thoughtseize protected hand here perfectly, so we are guaranteed a Growth Spiral on turn 2. There's a Thoughtseize as always. They take out the Growth Spiral, pass back. Want to see what they want to do on their turn. They play a Blood-type Harvester, so I'm going to Growth Spiral first. Drop a Fable Passage, thin out the deck a little bit, get something going. We're going to drop the Path to the World Tree here, grab another land. Pass back, see what our opponent does on 3. They go to combat here, so we just want to preserve our life total, keep their board clear. So we'll use the Tyrant Scorn they know about. They deploy a Fable of the Mirrorbreaker. We get our Fable of the Mirrorbreaker, so we'll pass for that. Shock in, pass the turn. They don't discard, which makes you think they clearly have a very strong hand. They go to combat here. We're winning the life race, and I'm not going to trade here because if they have more removal or something like this Fable, which they play here, I'm going to use the Tyrant Scorn to get rid of their Fable token. We get Leyline Binding here, which is huge. You might ask what I'm saving up for. I'm saving up for the activation of Path of the World Tree here. So once this Fable token attacks, we'll have 7 mana required. Eventually, when our opponent lets us think. Remember, this is time 2 speed, so... Alright, Fable flips for them and they get more looting. And we now see why they're splashing blue. They swing in with the Fable, get another 2 damage in, and they play Nicol the God, the Dragon God. They activate, so I'm going to use all of my resources here to make a bear, draw 2 cards, kill their reflection, and drain them 2 life. We can exile a land from hand to keep our resources going. We have a Clarion, which is an interesting choice here. What we're going to do is attack down Nicol Bolas with our 2 tokens. Now we can use the Kolaghan's Command to make them discard and do the last 2 damage. I just checked my graveyard to see if I had any creatures because I couldn't remember if they fought see something away. They lose a land and go down. We'll put Fable into our Kolaghan's Command into our Yorion into hand. Sorry. Opponent grabs a Thoughtseize, so in response I'm going to Leyline Binding, and I'm going to get rid of their reflections of Kiki-Jiki here, just so they don't get any value out of it. They go down to 8 and get rid of our Yorion. They play Phyrexian Obliterator, which is terrible for us. So, here's the deal, we're going to pass. Opponent has another Nicol Bolas Dragon God, they are an 8. So they go for the plus here, so let's cycle the Triarm, see what we draw. We get Vanishing Verse, which is huge. We get rid of the Deafening Clarion. They go for the Thoughtseize, so in response we get rid of the Obliterator. Now we can end step make another token, and we have Lethal with the Swing Through to kill them, so they concede. Whew, that was a tight game, but really fun. And finally, our third match here is against Skirklord, and this match was a grind fest. The entirety of the list of the video is this match. Spoiler alert. We go down to 6, get rid of the Wandering Mind because we don't have red, and then we proceed to get trolled by drawing a red card. They play an Elemental here, we get another red card. They go to combat here and attack. So, spoiler alert, this is basically 80 card, 5 color Atraxa deck, basically. So they are basically Omnath Atraxa deck. We get rid of the Diffing Druid. At this point though, I don't know that they are running the Atraxa, so I'm just playing as if they're a 4 color Elementals deck. Which, surprising, is not as potent if your opponent doesn't have a billion free BS Elementals they can blink. Salty old ex-modern player talking there. Alright, they get the Omnath Locus of Creation, draw a card. We discard 2 cards here because we want to try and find removal for Omnath, which we do thankfully. We'll play another Fable of the Mirrorbreaker and we'll drop a Leyline Binding here to get rid of Omnath. They have another Omnath because they can draw more Omnaths than I can believe in my life. They get the mana now. They got 5 mana for another spell. They play the Omnath number 2 to get rid of that. We flip the Saga. Choose not to discard anything. We'll just use Niv here to reload and find some answers. Supreme Verdict is the perfect answer here.
Reload!
So now we got to think what our opponent's going to do. They get World Tree, so they have fixed mana now. They pump their Omnath. Play a Cavalier of Thorns. Swing for turn. Pump the Cavalier so it can block Niv. They clearly don't know about Kaito. So let the reflections flicker here. I'm going to use Kaito here. And I'm going to use him to make Niv unblockable to get through. And then I would consider bouncing Niv to replay him later, but the problem is I realise, and this is crazy to see it here, I don't actually have a second white for the Supreme Verdict. So our opponent goes now and goes into tank for a while and then uses one of their cards here to Eldritch Evolution, the Cavalier of Thorns, to get the Atraxa. And then I think they disconnect because they literally time out here with the Atraxa trigger on the stack. They literally burn it out. So while this burns out, I'm just going to have my little talk here. I've had people in paper and online ask why I'm not playing Atraxa or using her in any way. I don't like this card. Like, it's really good, don't get me wrong, but it's too easy. Even here, as I said before, this is built... Atraxa just encourages you to play the best of everything. There's no challenge, restrictions. Even this package of Eldritch Evolutioning a creature, Atraxa just finds another creature. You know, she just finds the combo to get her again. Same with Reanimator. You reanimate Atraxa, she finds another reanimation spell because she can grab any instant that you want. Whereas, what I like in Bring to Light is I cast Niv to hit Bring to Light to maybe get Niv again. And what I'm saying is splitting hairs here. I'm just not a real fan of the design of Atraxa. I don't like just pile good stuff decks like we see here. Our opponent then concedes because they screwed up the trigger, so we'll go to game 2. I bring in Thoughtseizes and Vetoes. Go down 1 Edgar here. No Kerrigan's Command yet. And a Clarion because our opponent's creatures are pretty huge. And run it back like this. Yeah, so this is basically just 4 color elementals splashing Atraxa. Yes, as I said before, the Atraxa decks just don't appeal to me because it's literally just what's the best creature, what's the best enchantment, what's the best spell. There's no removal. So we keep this in a meme here because we've got the Supreme Verdict if they deploy a bunch of elementals. So we just start dropping lands here. The plan is Supreme Verdict on 4, into a Niv Mizzet on 5. But I make the blunderiest of all blunders here. I forget that I played the Jund land. I thought I played the Sultai land. So I thought I already had my blue and my white sorted here. So I play the wrong land and can't Supreme Verdict. If I could claim this is just to see if they'll commit more stuff to the board, but you know, it's just a complete and utter misplay on my behalf. We get hit here with the Omnath, they drop a land, get some life, Yorion to blink it all. Right, with this revealed now, we drop the land and we'll just use the Supreme Verdict to clear the board here. They have another Omnath, which gets them another draw, 4 more life. Play land here. I get greedy here and go for a Wandering Mind early. And ultimately choose to get, I'm torn, but I get the Fable of the Mirror Breaker here. I use Leyline Binding to get rid of the Omnath. They use a Leyline Binding to get rid of my Leyline Binding. Draw a card, make mana, gain life. I play a land here and go for Niv Mizzet, and they have the counter. So at this point I'm just going to concede. Just to save time, really. They've already established their engine and they're good to go here. So we go down Kaitos and 1 Edgar. We've seen that their removal is March of Worldly Light, and they're basically a landfall deck. So we keep a hand here that actually has a really good spread here of lands and removal. Yes, this is what the main Niv decks have become in Pioneer now. They've turned into Omnath decks just for the response to the aggro decks. But you know, we'll see how that shakes out. I still prefer my Niv. Like, it's not top tier, but it's still my favourite. We're going to drop a Fable on 2. Now, they drop a Risen Reef. And another land. I choose to cycle away a land to get some answers. Swing in with the Goblin token. Choose to play a land untapped. Tyrant Skull on the Risen Reef so they don't get any value from it. Vanishing versus the other creature just to keep the cards low. Bearing in mind now that we've seen that they have counter magic, so we've got to play around that if possible. I play the Edgar because if they do have the Mystic Dispute, they can't use it to kill anything major on us. They put Yorion to hand here. I ultimately decide that I'm going to go to combat here after I play a Path to the World Tree. Again, I'm just going to play around the potential Mystic Dispute here. I'm going to wait for them to tap out. I'm thinking they might have a hand in their Atraxa in hand. And then we go to combat and just swing in with these two. They Growth Spiral on the end step. Play another land. So they have the mana now for Atraxa. They drop a land, crack it, so at least I know they're not holding an Omnath. And they play Ugin, because I forgot you can also play the best Planeswalkers in the world with Atraxa because she has no restrictions. They downtick to get rid of all our permanents. Now that they're tapped out, I'm going to go for the reload because Niv can't also tick. Ugin can't tick down. I get the worst reload ever. Only one card. They uptick to get hit with us. They have an Atraxa. They hit everything they need because, like I said, it's not even a card you need to build around. You can just stick it in any deck, it'll draw you 7 cards. Which is a shame because we draw a second Assassin's Trophy. So first things first, kill Atraxa to clear the way for the roadblock here. My opponent thinks I must be holding counter magic here because I then go to combat, swing in for the Ugin, and they don't use the Leyline Binding they got in hand. They literally don't know what my 2 cards are, so they're trying to play it safe. They play an Omnath, draw a card, play a land, gain some life, play a land, get mana. So, they play Yorion, blink Omnath, then use the Eldritch Evolution, and I think this is going to grab another Atraxa. However, this grabs an Elesh Norn here. So they're clearly trying to double up their ETBs and shut down ours, so I'm going to Assassin's Trophy the March of the Mother before they get a double trigger with Omnath. They still get to draw a card, but that's not the worst. They're still scared of the 1 card I've got in hand here, so I don't think they'd use it yet. We play a land, go for a Growth Spiral. Draw a card, we pass. We cycle this land. We find our Leyline Binding here, so we go to combat now. And now they deploy it because they're pretty sure that they've got something here. So I ultimately wait till they tap out now, cycling their lands, to Leyline Binding back our Niv, to draw all of our cards. Now the one thing is we don't have blue because of the way things tapped. Fortunately, we just gotta hope here that they don't go for anything that would require a Dovin's Veto. They swing in with their Omnath, which means they must have a second Omnath or a way to blow up the board. Yep, there's their third or fourth Omnath for this game. Probably their fifth, knowing how good they've drawn. Yes, it's me checking. It's actually their second. Feels like more though, because of all the blinking. They gain mana, and they go for a March of Otherworldly Light, so we're going to use Tyrant Scorn's second ability to bounce our Niv out of our hands. This is also great now because we can now deploy a Solar Blaze with no danger of any creatures dying. Ultimately I choose not to deploy anything here because I want to hold up a veto for anything stupidly scary. I consider dropping Niv here, but I decide we've already got a full hand, so let's just 1-for-1 them here. They choose to take out the Fable with the veto. They play a Leafkin Druid, not too worried about that. Choose to Vanishing Verse it. As I said, we'll 1-for-1 until there's nothing left but the Niv, and we want to play Niv hopefully with counter backup, which we have here. So we play Niv Mizzet. Find 3 more cards here. Go to combat. Reload! Well, so go to their turn. Opponent cycles. Plays a Risen Reef, so they start to gain some value again. Shocking a land, go for a Titan of Industry here. They ultimately go for the Destroy an Enchantment to get a Rhino, so they destroy Leyline Binding to get back their Leyline Binding, which takes out on Niv Mizzet. What we go for here is end step. We go for the Vanishing Verse to get back Niv Mizzet here. They immediately Leyline Binding, which is a huge mistake because we can now hit the perfect card in Supreme Verdict. So now we have a way to blow up their entire board. We still have a Vanishing Verse in hand here that could deal with potentially that Leyline Binding. We choose not to take the Growth Spiral and throw away another Growth Spiral. Opponent Growth Spirals themselves. Plays the Cavalier of Dawn. Blows up our Wandering Mind to make a 3/3. We play a land here. Play a second Wandering Mind. Cavalier of Dawn can bring back an enchantment if we kill it. So we take the Leyline Binding here. Play Leyline Binding to get rid of the Cavalier of Dawn. Then go to combat and swing in with the 3/3. Our opponent's last card is Odawara. So they get back the Cavalier, blow up our 3/3 to make another 3/3. We just redeploy the Leyline Binding, get rid of the Cavalier here. Our opponent goes to their turn. They play an Omnath, Locus of Royal. We bounce again with Tyrant Scorn, get that Wandering Mind back in our hand because every ETB is another spell that could be essential at this late game point. We swing in, offering a trade. Use a Clarion to wipe the board. Play land untapped. Deploy Wandering Mind. Find our 4th Leyline Binding. Our opponent plays the land. They have no action in hand, so we go for the Vanishing Verse to get rid of the Leyline Binding and they concede. Good matches all round.